researchers and students and colleagues. And I think we have so much in common with UNU Merit, with Roma Tre, with all the different institutions. This is a seminar, let's say, that is allowed by the Cut Chain program, this European Union finance project that is allowing lots of us to travel to different countries and spend time together and have a lot of fun and share ideas that hopefully are useful and relevant for development purposes. Perhaps we can, I'd like to use some slides and try to share a bit of my ideas on nearshoring, on a term that has gained popularity recently. It's often quoted, we often see it in different newspapers, in different magazines, different governments are beginning to use this kind of terminology. And this is a joint work that I did with my junior colleague Cecilia Seri at UNU Merit, Maastricht, where we try to discuss a little bit what this is about. The terminology is being used in many different ways. It's very vaguely referring to exact theories and exact concepts, and we'd like to try to draw some clarity on the concept and try to measure whatever is possible to measure in a phenomenon like this, and then we try to draw some implications for Latin Americans. Essentially, the outline of my speech today will be the following. I'll start with a little bit of reference to the literature, discussing what these concepts are, what the determinants of this phenomenon appear to be, and then I try to map the phenomenon in Latin America with some data, showing that. Let me give you the conclusion of the paper of the study. That does not appear to be very much evidence confirming that friendshoring is really happening very much. And not only that, we then try to discuss, in case this indeed happened, in case friendshoring would really be happening, would Latin American countries be ready to attract these flows of investment? Would they be ready to benefit from these flows of investment or not? Is there something in place, something happening? And do we find any evidence of that? And finally, given that this is a very dynamic process, I mean, this paper was just published a couple of weeks ago by the Transnational Corporations Journal that is published by UNCTAD, and but a number of different things are happening in the middle. So I conclude by reopening the question and showing a couple of pieces of evidence that would, in one case, confirm and in one case contradict my conclusion. Right. So let's start with the literature. We are in a university, so let's try to go back to the theories and understand a bit what is behind this phenomenon. The historical trends, the process that led to globalization and a tremendous expansion of trade, foreign investment, the emergence of value chains. This happened, this started to become apparent about 3 decades ago, at the end of 1900, as a result of many different things, as a result of liberalization policies. Trade was allowed to flow more freely than in the past, but also thanks to changes in technologies, a fall in transport costs, a fall in information costs, and the cost of transferring knowledge and information across the board, that made it possible to organize production efficiently and differently. And there where value chains, GVCs, come into play. This has been growing, has been expanding for at least a couple of decades. Then, beginning with 2010 onwards, a number of things have been changing a little bit. There's been rising labor costs that would change the motivation of shifting part of production in different countries. So it wasn't not as convenient as before to have part of production carried out in China, say, or Vietnam, because wages have been growing in those countries as well. And therefore, this forced multinational corporations to reconsider part of their decisions. There's been increasing uncertainty regarding international trade flows, regarding international exchanges, protectionist policies that have become more widespread among advanced countries, European Union, the US, and others. And more recently, if we think of the last 3-4 years, 4-5 years, newer developments such as the pandemic, such as the widespread or the increasingly widespread use of fourth industrial revolution technologies, automation to some extent, artificial intelligence to some extent, and the wars and the uncertainty that the Ukraine and Russia war, and then more recently what is happening in the Middle East. And suddenly the world woke up and said, "Oh, maybe we've overdone it. Maybe globalization has gone too far." Danny Roderick used to use the sentence, "Is globalization gone too far?" That is, perhaps, I mean, in the consideration of governments in advanced countries nowadays, perhaps once COVID came, realized that few countries or no country could produce the little masks, or even worse, the vaccines, and therefore relying on having the mask produced in China or somewhere else would be too risky. So again, I mean, this introduced uncertainty. The governments realized of the risk they were running, and this has been leading to some process of moving back, reducing the extent of globalization. Nowadays, we discuss, there's lots of papers and governments and academics that start discussing whether globalization is going further, whether it's going to be slowed down and reduced, whether look at the economic policies implemented by the IRA in the US, but the various packages in Europe, China, and so on. So really, we are perhaps at the crossroads, and we wonder what will happen after these 3 decades of expanding globalization and expanding international production. Now, the topic of today is a bit more specific to what has been happening more recently, and how to explain it in terms of theories. In the literature, what is reshoring? We try to build this table. It's not complicated. Just try to follow me and consider that the decisions of multinational corporations to carry out production and organize production is based on 2 sets of considerations. Where to carry out production, so a geographical dimension, and then a corporate boundary, a kind of sourcing dimension. Should I do and should I carry out the different tasks necessary to obtain a finished product within the boundaries of the corporation? Should I do it partly outside of the corporation? So these are the 2 strategic objectives: corporate boundary decision and location decision. And then in each of these, we have different categories. So the corporate boundary might be that the corporation decides to make everything in-house, like the old Ford factories 100 years ago, where Ford used to produce from steel to finished parts, everything in-house. Or could outsource, could buy from outside, and a newly minted Ford would rely on production carried out in different factories and then buying the different components. Or a hybrid, so developing partnerships, developing agreements, and partnerships can take many different forms. can be of an equity nature or non-equity nature, could imply agreements of different kinds, developing and carrying out some tasks rather than others together, and so on. And value chains is a subset, or is a specific dimension of this hybrid decision of carrying out production partly in-house, partly outside, and therefore organizing production along this fault. And at the same time, we have the geographical dimension. That is whether these decisions of corporate boundary are carried out in the same country, are carried out very far, or are carried out in the region, in the vicinity, in the proximity. And then we can therefore expand and interpret this 3x3 matrix that foresees 9 possibilities of organizing international production. Like, if suppose a firm decided to produce everything inshore in the same country and could rely on domestic divisions, or making everything in different divisions owned by the same company, or develop partnerships with other companies in the country, or buy from suppliers in the country. So having others do and then buy from them. Or let's go to the opposite, to the opposite extreme. If a firm decided to offshore, that is to carry out production activities in a distant country, so it could decide to establish a foreign subsidiary to invest and develop a plant in a foreign country, or could, instead of doing everything himself or herself, developing a partnership with some local company and buy shares, or merge and acquire local companies, or the opposite extreme, buy from foreign suppliers. So buying offshore and outsourcing, that is buying from suppliers. And in the middle, we have this nearshoring, which is, with this geographical dimension, is changing. So it's something that is being carried out, say, in Central America for Costa Rica, in near areas, could be near provinces. I mean, we do not necessarily have to define the geographical dimension as at the level of the state. It could be, federal countries, could be at the level of different states. Think of Brazil, 30 different states. Then a nearshoring could be developing something between São Paulo and Minas Gerais, which is close by, or things like that. And therefore, nearshoring is essentially the object of what we try to analyze today. That is shoring and organizing production, either establishing affiliates in a foreign nearby country, or developing partnerships in the proximity, regionally, or sourcing from providers that are located nearby. And essentially, this is somehow a way of portraying a nearshoring decision by multinational corporations. There's an additional dimension to that. That is the so-called friendshoring. That is, instead of near, or together with near, they shore where friends are. And in a recent dialogue I had online with, it's going to be published in a few weeks, with a Harvard Business School professor, Professor Shi, where we were discussing the geopolitics of friendshoring. And one thing we agreed was that it is very hard to define what a friend is in international business. Who is a friend? And do friends stay friends forever? Or maybe Jeffrey and myself are very good friends, but maybe next year we fight for some reason, and we're not friends anymore. So I make an agreement with him, and next year, who knows? And then friendship in business could be different from friendship in political dimensions. I wouldn't think that the US and China are so friends in terms of political values. In terms of business, I think they are much more friends than politically. So, I mean, the concept is very vague. It's probably abused by governments nowadays. So that's what it is, the phenomenon we try to analyze. Secondly, let us ask ourselves what determines this process. What are the process? What are the possible factors that would induce multinational corporations to move from a full globalization to reshore part of their activities and move back and move near, move where friends are supposed to be, and so on? And the literature suggests a number of different explanations. In the paper, you have the exact references to the literature and so on, but there's some authors that think that reshoring is essentially a way of acknowledging a mistake and saying, oh, I got it wrong, I have to move back. I mean, I thought that the labor costs were much lower, indeed they're not. I thought that transporting goods across the world was easy, it is difficult and costly. So it's an adjustment vis-a-vis previously incurred decisions that represented mistakes. Others think that multinational corporations realize that this process of organizing production or reshuffling production and so on has introduces problems of flexibility and imposes an excessively rigid structure. Others realize that there's a supplier-consumer mismatch, so fulfilling consumers' desires could be complicated. You need to be closer to the final market, you need to understand it better, and therefore you may modify your organizational production accordingly in order to better respond to the market. Or there's this argument regarding innovation, which I like very much, and that would suggest that innovation requires proximity to production, that you cannot carry out innovative processes and research and development and the development of new processes and products if manufacturing is very far. That appears to be suggested to apply to the case of Apple, for example. It has been reinvesting part of its activities in the US, again, after many years of doing everything outside, but the design and research in California. Now, apparently, they're moving back some production facilities because they realize that manufacturing processes need to feed innovation and research and innovation needs to be experimented, and this very Schumpeterian idea of incremental learning and mutually influencing production and research and innovation that forces that puts a limit to the geographical spread of activities. To some extent, activities need to be close because innovation is nurtured by proximity with manufacturing. And then there's other explanations that are proposed by the literature, like the wages that are not so convenient anymore, government incentives and policies that are inducing firms to move back or to move forward or to go in the vicinity. The subsidy that the US government is promising Intel to move back part of chip production to Costa Rica. This money is the result of government incentives that the US is giving to a US company that will have an impact on this shoring decision. And there's the impact of emerging technologies, automation, digitalization. And again, here there are conflicting opinions whether digitalization makes value chains easier or makes it better and more advisable to shorten value chains and keep control because of the risk involved. And the COVID, the increased uncertainty, all the discussion about resilience, we may have a very efficient GVC that would reduce the cost of production and the final price to consumers. But if we taking into account the risks and the uncertainty, then we should weigh the economic advantages and a better efficiency with the risk involved, and this might shift a bit the balance and the decision of where and how to organize production internationally. Now, we defined that. Let me try to tell you a little bit about the evidence that we managed to gather. First of all, the blue sentence, all measures in this field are very firm. Yes, the literature has proxies, proposes ideas, proposes ways of somehow measure some components of this process, but it's very difficult. Firm level case studies are sometimes developed, but they're scattered, they're hard to compare with other cases and other companies. FDI data that is mainly produced by UNCTAD and governments doesn't usually have a very detailed sectoral dimension. It's difficult to measure bilateral flows of investments, and we're really talking about a company that was previously investing in one country and then decides to move elsewhere that would require bilateral flows, which are hardly available internationally in the data set. And perhaps the easiest way to measure and try to get proxies of this phenomenon is through international trade data, which is mainly what we do. That is looking at international trade data, because trade data would reveal the transactions that occur among companies located in different parts of the world. So a multinational corporation based in China that is sourcing products from Vietnam and selling to India and sourcing others from France, then this is captured by international trade flows, and more specifically by international trade measured in value added, which is the methodology that was built to measure the extent and the spread of global value chains, not gross trade any longer, in order to avoid duplications of accounting values, but really taking into account the value that is added in each layer of the value chain by different firms located in different countries. So international trade data offers some proxies. And let me show you a little bit of analysis that we did. Again, I refer to the details in the paper, but for example, we started by looking at the US intermediate goods imports from select countries and regions. What is the logic here? The logic is that the extent of international organizational production chosen by US multinational corporations is measured or proxied by how much they buy from outside and how much intermediate goods they buy to carry out their own production of finished products. And here we have, Europe, Canada, China, Latin America, and the Caribbean, US imports, and we see what do we notice here? We notice that Latin America is this dotted line, goes up and down over the last 15 years. But what is clear is that China has been increasing its value of goods, intermediate goods imported by the US. So that will reveal that there's a lot of transactions of intermediate goods that are then used in value chains and by multinational corporations in the US. And something similar has been happening with the European Union flows. The speed of growth from China has been faster. Latin America has been going up and down. But if we look at similar data from the perspective of Latin America and the Caribbean, and we wonder, where does the value added produced in Latin America go? And is there any change over time, over these 10 years that we could consider? We see that the situation is not changing very much, but we see this sort of dark this blue gray area, which is China. So the share of China has been doubled in 10 years. So a lot of Latin American countries sell to China goods that are then processed in China and then exported elsewhere. The US maintains a strong leadership in this regard with Latin America, and Europe has been shrinking its share relative to what happened to China. And if we go to a lower level, to a specific country level, and I have the data here from 6 countries, but we have for more, we see that there are different models in place here. Perhaps the most visible example, the starkest example here is Mexico, where there's a very big share going to the US. It's great, and Costa Rica somehow following Mexico. It's similar in the organization of the trade flows, with lots of goods going to the US. And Costa Rica, interestingly, has also a more differentiated destination. So it's less tied to a few countries. In the southern cone, we see that Europe, which is blue, has a larger share than the others, but Costa Rica, is equally exposed to the US and to Europe. So it's a more balanced destination of production. And then looking at, I mean, we would have liked to have firm level data, but there's no firm level data on this. So we're trying to see whether there's a new data set that could offer some insights on that. But from the point of view of the US, US imports from selected countries as a share of US total imports. And we see, again, China goes from 15 to 22, 23. We see a sudden drop here. And Mexico is also going up. It's been going up from 10% to 14% here. The rest of Latin America, steady and going down. If we look at intermediate imports, being more specific and looking not at the finished product, but how intermediate goods are traded, then we see that the overall tendency is confirmed. We have Mexico has been going up a little bit, China even faster. The Latin American contingent has been maintaining steady shares and then going down. So I mean, if these were reliable proxies of some processes of friendshoring, we would see that something is happening between the US and Mexico, a lot US and China, very little with many other Latin American countries. So the little we could observe, the little insights and indications of some processes of friendshoring and nearshoring would be observed in Mexico and a little bit in Costa Rica, much less with other countries. Right, that's the main insight. Now, so not much evidence on nearshoring in Latin America. China is taking the central stage, although in the last few years, China is also relying much less on international trade, and it's producing much more value added domestically, which is also changing the picture. But we ask ourselves whether, in case multinational corporations decided to follow a reshoring or backshoring or friendshoring strategy and found it convenient, would Latin American countries be ready to attract these flows and interact with these flows and make use of these flows for their own benefit? And we try to build a sort of index of reshoring readiness, which contains a number of elements from the digital adoption. So how developed is the digital infrastructure in the country? How widespread the use of digital devices is? The logistics, there are different indicators. A summary indicator of logistics, a summary indicator of human capital, because you may well attract investment and trade of intermediate goods and so on. So pointing to a nearshoring or friendshoring, but you need to have the human capital to do this, and you need to have the research and the innovation to be able to interact with these flows and make use of these flows and use them for your own benefit. Intellectual property right is also an element, and then resilience index. That's a big another indicator that is looking at risk. The evidence is here. It's too small to see. I want you to try to extract the Costa Rica is here. Costa Rica is doing a little bit better than all Central American countries, and even better than some other Latin American countries in these different indicators. We did not try to compute a summary index because we thought it would be too arbitrary. We didn't know how to weigh the relevance of different indicators, but essentially we obtained evidence that the readiness to nearshoring, backshoring, compared with other countries in the world is lower in Latin America. So there's much to do to develop these pillars and to improve these pillars. So if I were to draw some conclusions, I would say that there's not much evidence of friendshoring already occurring, except for Mexico and a bit from Costa Rica. And even if multinational corporations found it convenient to do it, then the readiness to attract and work with nearshoring or backshoring flows is still uncertain. What are the options? One could think and one could discuss or do research on reshoring by Latin American multinational corporations. I mean, what if Brazilian corporations decided that in order to produce, I don't know, food or textile, instead of buying from China, they might start buying from nearby countries and doing themselves a reshoring process. So a regional dimension of that. And the regional integration in this regard could be looked as a different alternative, and regional policy coordination, how to face this decision of different multinational corporations to eventually invest in the region could be desirable. This is how we concluded the paper. Then, the other day I was reading the Financial Times. I don't know whether you've seen it, and there was a big title. The city where Mexico's nearshoring hype is becoming reality. This is, guess what? Monterrey, Nuevo León, at the border with the US. Monterrey is already the most industrialized state in Mexico, and there was this qualitative evidence suggesting that a lot is happening there. What local authorities would claim is that there's a lot of investments, billions of investments that are coming. They're not reflected in figures yet. Tesla is negotiating with the government and negotiating with Panasonic to produce batteries and cars in Monterrey with the support of the Polytechnic University there, already committed $5 billion. So the article was saying, oh, some friendshoring is happening, some nearshoring is happening. This is, of course, Tesla is being subsidized by the US government in that regard. The Inflation Reduction Act contains subsidies for US corporations to invest in the US or in a set of near countries, reliable or friendly countries. defined by the government. So there's a public subsidy behind that. But the article was also noticing that there are still structural problems in this process. So Monterrey, the 11th most congested city in the world, traffic and moving goods and people and services is costly, public transportation limited, little water. Last year, for several months, only a few hours of water were available in the city. So that is a problem for any production activity. Electricity infrastructure is also problematic. So there are signs of some nearshoring and backshoring, but also problems that might emerge. And this is another piece of evidence that comes from the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland. They got access to a new data set produced by Standard & Poor's and other companies that allows to measure the consumer and producer linkages and the number of linkages developed between consumers and producers. So a firm might buy something from another company that buys something else from another company, and this in turn is used for fulfilling a consumer demand in another country, and they manage to trace these linkages across countries. And they developed a number of interesting graphs. So this is a paper available online for free, and you see this is one step to buy the customer linkages, is 2 steps. So firms rely. So this would be an indication that value chains are moving ahead. They're continuing and deepening. They are relying on multiple stages and multiple steps and transactions across different countries. And another piece of evidence is that the distance between firms in GVCs has increased since late 2021. So in the last 2 years, the distance, look at this diagram here. This is a distribution of supplier to customer distances. These are the number of stages, the number of steps. You buy from one and who's bought from another one and another one and another one, the number of transactions. And you see that the pink bars are the 2023 data, and the dots are 2021, and you see that the pink bars are higher than the dots for the larger number of steps. So it appears from these data, I don't know how reliable that is, I mean, I saw it the other day, but that this value chains are more widespread and involve a larger number of steps. So they're not shortening. On the other hand, they're lengthening. They involve a larger number of actors in the process. Final slide. This is another way of looking at and using the same idea. The supply chains appear to be lengthening. So the distance between blue is the start, the 2021, and the end of the arrow is the end 2 years later, and you have location of suppliers in red, location of customers in blue, red and blue, and you see that the distance appears to be increasing. So value chains appear to be lengthening. This would be an indication that the globalization is not moving backwards, but that there's more actors involved, and the places of transactions tend to be farther away. So value chains would not be shrinking and reducing, but according to this data, it would be still progressing. I don't know. There's big research questions here, but our effort was to essentially state that friendshoring is a very fashionable world. We tried to explain what that is. We found little evidence in Latin America, and more worryingly, we found evidence that countries appear to be a little prepared to attract and interact with this eventually happening future possible flows of trade and investment in their countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate. Probably we have many questions, but we will give the floor to Beatriz. Then you can also present your work, and then we have questions for both of you, if you are okay, because I know also you need to leave sometime. Then if we expand the discussion, then you have time also to leave if you need so. And very welcome.